In what seems like only yesterday, a trio of dreamers banded together to create and succeed in an impossible dream: to fly around the world without stopping and without refueling.
Now I want to take you back to December 14th, 1986. And we're sitting in the cockpit of this airplane and we're looking down a long runway at Edwards Air Force Base. It's the longest runway in the free world, and on the other end of this 3-mile runway is a beautiful dry lake called Muroc Dry Lake. And if something happens to this takeoff roll of this airplane, then maybe we can survive by landing out in the dry lake someplace.
After considerable on-the-spot engineering, challenges were overcome. Dick complained to Bert about the terrible turning qualities of the aircraft when it had a heavy load, and about the horrible handling qualities in the rain.
The airplane was highly compromised for range. Highly compromised for range. That means the vertical tails were just barely big enough to keep it going in the straight direction. And sometimes when you try to turn the airplane, the dihedral and the adverse yaw would make it turn back the opposite direction. I remember the first time I went into a real steep bank, and the Voyager, about 20 degrees is a steep bank, and I tried to roll out, and it yawed a little bit and rolled back the opposite direction. So the more I turned it to the right, the faster it turned to the left. And finally we neutralized everything, tried something else, made it lighter, went into kind of 0G to roll the airplane out. And I told Bert about that, and he says, "Dick," he says, "remember, it's mission adequate flying qualities." I says, "Yeah, Bert." Then he says, "Dick," he always says that to me when, when he thinks that I need to know something because I'm, well, whatever. He says, "Dick, it's a world flight. It doesn't have to turn at all." During one of the test flights, we flew into a little rain shower. And in the high desert of Mojave, there's not a lot of rain, so we flew into the rain. And the canard is a very special airfoil, highly loaded airfoil. So when we hit the rain, it disturbed the lift of the canard, and the nose started down, and it started heading for the desert. And not a thing I could do with the elevator or with the throttle or anything that we could recover from the dive. And right away, I could tell that there wasn't enough time to turn this big airplane around and fly out of it before we hit the desert floor. And I told Gina, "Get your parachute on, because you're getting out." And I ordered her to bail out of the airplane, because I didn't think we were going to make it. And she says, "What are you going to do?" And I says, "Well, I'm going to stay with the airplane." And so she put her parachute away and says, "I'm staying too." Well, fortunately, the rain quit, and we flew through the little shower, and it pulled out. And I'm not saying we pulled out in the weeds, but it was low enough to be out of control that it made you somewhat nervous. So I landed and went back, and fortunately for my brother's life, he wasn't there at the airport. I called him on the phone. And I says, "Bert," and I told him what happened, and his response was, "Don't fly in the rain." I says, "Bert, we're going around the world at the equator. You know how much rain and bad weather is around the world?" Anyway, we had a lot of fun, but the one that I liked the best was the size of the fuselage. Now, the bigger, the fatter the fuselage, and more comfortable it is, that means that the airplane goes slower, and it has more drag, and it has less range. So he designed the cockpit, he said, just big enough for us to survive the flight, and the required 48 hours you have to live afterwards. And he says, if you live longer than the flight and the required 48 hours after the flight, obviously it was too big and we just had wasted range capability.
Voyager's takeoff holds the record as the longest takeoff roll in Edwards Air Force Base history. It took 2 minutes and 14 seconds before Voyager would lift off. Nothing involving the flight would be easy. Each day was filled with drama. But they solved the problem, and after more than 9 days of flying near death's door, it was time to come home. Not having seen a newspaper or heard a news broadcast, the crew had no idea they had captured the hearts of America and the world. They had no idea that tens of thousands of people had lived each day of the flight with them and would be standing by, either in person or near a television, to await the completion of this remarkable adventure.
And so I thought, they may not even let me in. I can't remember asking for permission. And I thought, gee, maybe there won't be anybody there to give us a ride back to our cars that we left back in Mojave. So I crossed my fingers and I keyed the mic button. It says, Edwards Tower, this is Voyager 1. It says, sir, we're about 20 minutes out, and I know you're really busy, and I don't want to interfere with any of your flight test activities. But if you just kind of let me circle around and land on the northern dry lake, I'd really appreciate that. And I crossed my fingers and says, oh, please let me in, feel sorry for me. And the tower operator came back and he says, Voyager 1, this is Edwards Tower. He says, sir, we have canceled flying for today, and we're all here waiting for your return. And a few minutes later, I looked up, and the undercast came away, and then what was presented to us was that beautiful dry lake. This is Aviation's hallowed ground, where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier and recovered our first space shuttle. And all the early jet development happened in this place. And I thought, man. And then I saw all the people. There was tens of thousands of people that came up from Los Angeles, and they lined the western dry lake for us. And I thought, wow, for us, for this little home built, why would they be interested in that? Then I realized, that I got to make a good landing down here. And if I mess this up, there's a lot of people down there with a lot of film that I can't buy. And it was 9 days and 3 minutes and 44 seconds. And it's the first ever non-stop, non-refuel flight. And it was done by who? It was done by a bunch of EAAers who just thought that they could do anything they could dream about as long as they worked really hard and they didn't give up. And that's the essence of the story.
The Voyager flight was not Dick Rutan's first adventure, nor his last. He's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, a hero, and a patriot. As a United States Air Force fighter pilot, he flew 325 combat missions in Vietnam. On his last mission over North Vietnam, he was hit by enemy ground fire and was forced to eject from his burning F-100. Before retiring from the Air Force in 1978, Lieutenant Colonel Rutan had been awarded the Silver Star, 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 16 Air Medals, and the Purple Heart. More recently, Dick has flown around the world in his Long Easy, this time with many stops. Bailed out of the Global Hilton on an attempt to fly a balloon around the world, his 3rd life-saving parachute jump, and has been rescued from the top of the world after his sightseeing airplane crashed through thin ice at the North Pole. Dick is now beginning a new chapter in his life of adventure as the chief test pilot of the Easy rocket. Dick has received hundreds of awards and honors, including the Collier Trophy, aviation's most prestigious award. Another of Dick's proud accomplishments is his involvement as a spokesman for the Experimental Aircraft Association's Vision of Eagles education programs. Through these programs, Dick has spoken to thousands of students, encouraging them and their teachers. The entire Voyager project was made possible by individuals willing to work hard and take a chance. From engine development to the headsets that saved the hearing of the pilots, to those in mission control monitoring the weather, this was a project of teamwork, where a small army of just over 100 volunteers, without government assistance, made the impossible possible. Dick says adventure is the essence of life, and he's always ready to jump into or out of the next adventure. The Voyager flight was a remarkable achievement. The absolute world record set back in 1986 remain unchallenged today. Dick enjoys sharing his stories of dreams, desire, dedication, and determination, and looks forward to speaking to your group. Please call the number on this tape and speak to the representative about booking Dick Rutan for your next event. And until you hear it from him in person, always remember, if you can dream it, you can do it.